Check. Everybody good? Yeah. Give it up for the food. The food was slapping. And also thanks to the farmers and the workers who made that food possible, and those who cooked it, and those who were cleaning up. Man, I'm really full off that food. Which itself is a translocal and transnational phenomenon. So my story starts like a lot of Filipinos, second generation Filipinos, actually in the Philippines. My parents were both post-World War II children of families who survived through World War II, and they were the younger siblings of families that lost, you know, they had older brothers and sisters, both my parents that died during the war, and so my Lolo and Lola on both sides were actually real old already by the time they had my mom and dad. My mom was the fourth of five surviving children. My dad was the 9th out of 10. And they were the only ones out of their families, up until just recently, where more started immigrating, who left the countryside of the Philippines, Nueva Vizcaya and Nueva Ecija. My father got recruited into the military by way of Subic Bay during the martial law era, and got shipped out to Italy, to a base in Italy, where he met my mom, who was part of the first wave of domestic workers, domestic help that was recruited from the countryside in the Philippines. Even though they lived and grew up in towns that were probably an hour away from each other in the Philippine countryside, they met thousands of miles away in Italy, where I was made. Before my father was re-stationed, he made every effort to, I want my kid to be born in America. So when my mom was 8 months pregnant, they found their way to Long Beach, California, where I was born, lived there for my infancy. My dad got re-stationed in San Diego, lived in National City for 1.5 years, then was raised in Hawaii, lived there for 9 years up until 1991. I was born in 1980. And so all my childhood memories are actually in and around Hawaii. Before relocating to Bremerton, Washington, at the time the most livable city in the U.S. in 1991, and went there for my middle school and high school years. Once that was done, went across the water to Seattle, where I've now called home for 16 years now. So Seattle is now home. It's the one place that I identify most with, even though I've moved around to many different areas. Spent more than half my life there at this point, but I hated it. Hawaii, when I got to Washington, I was like, yo, it's about Hawaii. And even before that, when we was in Hawaii, moms and pops were always talking about, whenever they used the word home, they weren't talking about our house in Hawaii. They were talking about the Philippines. So I grew up with this notion of like, yo, home, there is no home, or everywhere is home, or home is wherever we just happen to be at that moment. And I think that is a driving force in a lot of the art that I create, whether it be through music or photography, or even like now doing the pop-up restaurant with my wife, Cheryl, and food justice, and all these things together. It's like, what is home? And part of that is you know, the military background, being a military brat, like not knowing where we're going to be next year, who my friends are going to be, and even living in a community where people are coming in and out. Like you have friends for 2 years, and then your best friend's gone forever. And then it happened to us, ourselves. So I think about this all the time, you know, it's in the lyrics, this whole notion of translocal, transnational. As far as it goes with hip hop, I remember having a conversation with Mark a while back, a long time ago, before the Empire Funk thing, and I always had this theory, and I'm glad like he's bringing it into fruition and documentation to share with people, is that it wasn't until like high school that I started interacting with like the greater Filipino community outside of the Filipinos who live and work around military bases, and found out that y'all some different motherfuckers, man. Like, you don't have ID cards, you know, you use different language, like jargon, y'all don't know how to, if I say like, you know, it's 2,100 hours right now, like, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. You know, it's bagging groceries when you're a teenager, things like that. Getting things tax-free at the Navy Exchange, and the selection of hip-hop music that was there as opposed to a regular record store. You know, it was also in that the interaction that you're kind of forced to have, not only with other Filipinos who are in the same situation, but people from other backgrounds. Like, you were always in contact with people, other, you know, Americans, Black Americans, white Americans from all over the country, even in Hawaii, out of all places. Like, I meet someone from the South, from whose family grew up in New York, and then they were gone like 2 years later. So there was always this movement of people from other backgrounds, as well as Filipinos from these other areas. And it was always this theory that I had, again, talking with Mark and a handful of other people, that it was us. It was the Filipinos within the Filipino community who were in these pockets. That was the first wave of people to break out of our bubbles as a community and actually like interact in like Jeff said, in the polycultural setting where we're interacting with people who bring with them like different cultural practices, different forms of expression, and that's where I came in with hip-hop. Hip-hop was something that was always there, like BAM. It was just kind of like the soundtrack and the lifestyle that I found myself in. But it was sped up by the fact that there was a lot of movement in the community that I was in. Physical movement, like bodies being moved, families being moved, meaning like there was always a new student in class. I swear to God, like every week, like somebody just left, and then somebody else, and it was always exciting. It was like, oh shit, who's the new cute girl that's over here? Oh, she's from Cali. Oh, where? Yeah, her brother's a b-boy, and then the next thing you know, we were like, oh shit, yo, dude got mixtapes and VHS tapes, b-boy battles that's going on down in Cerritos and West Covina, and oh shit, yeah, bring that. So this whole translocal thing was very much, if that wasn't built into my community and my upbringing, I don't know if I would have even got to this point where I'm sitting in front of y'all, or even had made an album. It was really like, I remember it was somebody that moved up from California in 1993 when I was in 7th grade, who had a cassette tape, a Master Plan cassette tape. And that was the first time I ever saw, like, holy shit, there's Filipino dudes like actually rapping and putting out music like this. That was crazy, because up until then it was just like something that we did in our house parties and garages and things like that. And that started opening my mind to like, wow, there's us's in other places. And it's always been my mission to try to connect those dots. Yeah. And that goes through connected with Bamboo and doing what we do as a bar. We had this idea that, you know, Bamboo is a very accomplished musician in his own right, Blue Scholars has done their thing, but as the bar, we're like, yo, let's scale back from that. And so when we go on tour, we're trying to hit the dive bars in the Bremerton, Washington, you know what I'm saying? We're trying to, where it's like small pockets of Filipinos are at, and like that's where we're trying to hit. And I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to set that context of like this idea of everything that was in the previous panel was very important, and I cling on to that. And the fact that I rep Seattle so hard is because I finally found a place that I've embraced and that has embraced me back. But it's also the movement from place to place, I think more so characterizes who I am and everything that I do.
Everybody's closed caption.
That's not my name.
Oh, that's okay. It's okay.
Sorry. I don't know.
No, that's okay. Everyone spells it wrong all the time.
Sorry.
It's all
Stay
good.
balanced.
Can you guys hear me? This is so weird, like wearing this, but hi, my name's Cheryl. First of all, I want to thank the editors for not just putting this on, but definitely the book and the opportunity to write in the book. That was really amazing to have us be able to tell our stories. And I think I wrote that in every one of their books when we were signing each other's books, like, thank you for letting us tell our stories. So I guess my bio says I grew up in Cerritos, so I think my story kind of starts where Mark's and Rep Maddox's story sort of flows in, because those guys are sort of kind of my kuyas growing up in Cerritos. United Kingdom begat with Public Image, begat Modern Music, Legend, I mean, all those DJ crews. But essentially my article in the book is about sort of my story, about, I'm sort of more in the hip hop dance kind of community. Although Cerritos had DJs, B-boys, car crews, gangs, we had it all. And when I was thinking about this topic of translocal, it was like, you know, all I had to do was go down to the park to meet up with other Filipinos that were in our community. A lot of us were also in the same confirmation group in our church. Yeah, we went to church together. See, well, I went to Catholic school, but we all grew up, you know, kind of outside of our doors. We didn't even go too far, is what I mean. I think a lot of people came to Cerritos to kind of grasp onto philams that, you know, participated in hip hop, that DJ, I mean, there were so many parties that happened. I know Mark mentioned some of them, talent shows and whatnot, but anyways, I love how I didn't really prepare too much. I have a little clip of my cousin a little bit later, but I love how Gio's up here talking about Hawaii and being in the Navy. I was a Navy brat myself. I was born in Oakland, but left right after Oakland, went to Hawaii, so we got Hawaii people up here. And it's funny, my boyfriend is also Kama'aina, but I make fun of him because I say that I actually learned how to walk and talk in Hawaii. I spent my first 5 years in Hawaii, then moved to the mainland, Long Beach and then Cerritos. So anyways, my dance crew in high school was called Funky Junction. And I think our styles were really more, and it wasn't like we saw ourselves on TV or anything, but I mean, there was flash dance, there was break-in, there was the Lockers on TV, Soul Train, you know, we saw things on TV. Plus, we were also the generation growing up in the 80s. See, Mark's talking about the 70s. Growing up in the 80s, there was MTV and music videos when they were playing music videos, because they don't anymore, right? But the music videos back in the day, around that time, in the golden age of hip-hop, what they say, mid-80s to like about 92, 93, when I started here at UCI, they had a lot of dancers that sort of displayed their music physically, you know, in movement. So we were inspired by those music videos and the dancers that the rappers were putting on, or the MCs that were putting on their videos, as far as choreography, what we put on our stage. So that was where a lot of our influences came from. I remember coming to UCI, and Arnel's going to talk more about Kaba Modern in UCI, because he recruited me to go to when I got here to UCI, so he's going to finish that story. But I remember when I did come here to UCI, I met some people from like the Bay Area, and I don't even remember, but they had saw a VHS tape of my crew that made it up to the Bay Area somehow, and said, "Hey, I seen you," or I know Funky Junction. I'm like, really? Like, and these were people that were up in the Bay. The same, I think, occurred with a lot of the mixed tapes. You know, that I know E-Man made a lot of tapes. Icy Ice, you know, the DJs we grew up with made a lot of tapes.